Welcome to Investing in Sobriety, the podcast where we explore life, recovery, and the process of rebuilding from substance and process-based addictions. This is a space for real conversations, real experiences, and the transformations that happen when we truly invest in ourselves. I'm honored to introduce TJ Aitken. TJ didn't just stumble into addiction, he dove headfirst. By 18, he was selling drugs, bouncing through rehabs, watching friends die. The chaos kept spinning. A high school romance turned scandal, shooting heroin and coke, stolen guns, selling drugs, arrests, prison, and nearly 10 rehabs by 22. Then, he finally stopped running from himself and started investing in his recovery. Today, he's a father, a husband, a certified recovery coach, the Young People and Family Services Manager at CCAR, and host of the Recovery Matters podcast. TJ is living proof that even from the darkest corners, you can still find the light.
TJ is the Young People and Family Services Manager at CCAR in Connecticut, which is the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. Feel free to check out CCAR online at ccar.us. TJ, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, and it's good to be seen, brother.
Absolutely. It's better to be seen than viewed, right?
I guess they say that. So what I'd like to do is initially start off with like a quick intro as to where you are personally and professionally, but more so in recovery. Could you give us a quick snapshot of that?
My name is TJ. I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means I haven't had a drink or a drug since August 9th, 2016. I'm in my almost 9th year of recovery, coming up here in a couple of weeks. I just actually got back from a nice family vacation on Martha's Vineyard with a big part of my sponsorship family. Guys I got sober with in early recovery. I remember them all coming in, and my sponsor and his family, and it was really cool. We were actually out on the beach, and a buddy who we lost to active addiction's mother seen my post on Facebook. She said, "Where are you guys?" I said, "We're on this beach at the 20 marker." She's like, "Oh my God, I'm down the street." I reached right out to her. We were talking. She's like, "Meet me at the Jaws Bridge." So we went on over there, and she was crying, and we ran right up and gave her a hug, and she got to see my daughter, and we made that connection for a fallen brother, you know, somebody who lost their life to fentanyl recently. And you know, for me, I think service is a big part of it. I work at a nonprofit. We directly provide recovery support services to a big majority of Connecticut. I personally am in 12-step recovery. I sponsor other men. I actively work with a sponsor, go to meetings, go to groups, all that type of stuff. I think it's something that I've never really gave up in my life. I think it's something that's very, very important. And I'm also a family man. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I take time to cherish both of those things and grow in both of those things, I think. That's a major part of my recovery. I didn't have those things when I came into recovery. Some people do, some people don't. And I like to say I'm a survivor of the fentanyl epidemic going on right now today in America.
I think that's very fair to say. I love hearing how, well, first let me say I love hearing the sobriety date because I remember where I was at that point in time. And as I mentioned, we did meet almost identical time periods in a real sustainable recovery community. But more so how that community has become family. And I'm not just talking about a 12-step community. I'm talking about genuine, organic relationships that built a foundation in one place, but they've grown and expanded in so many other ways. It's something beautiful. It's something beautiful that I can't truly articulate. It's something that I've experienced, and it's something that's extremely nutritious to me as a human being, and is paramount in my recovery process.
Yes.
You know,
I think to touch on that, so recovery is a way of life, and we bring that way of life with us wherever we go. We're either growing or we're going. So when I look at something like that, I'm able to build relationships with other men who experience similar things with us, creating this bond. And in that bond, like me and you, we could not talk for 4 months and we pick up a relationship exactly where it left off, right? Because both of us are doing so many different things in our life. Our relationship doesn't need consistent watering because we're watering our own gardens, right?
Makes complete sense. So everything that you've said completely resonates with me because it's been my lived experience as well. but you made reference to not always having this in your life. So would you mind speaking to the listeners and sharing a little about your early childhood and what your process looked like as you found yourself into addiction?
Sure. I come from a stereotypical middle-class family. My mom worked for a cell phone company, and my father worked for a manufacturing company. They divorced when I was young. I have a younger brother who's also a person in recovery. I had that typical, 350 kids in my graduating class, middle of the pack athlete. I was good at school, but I didn't enjoy it, so I never did homework. I never did any of those things. I was in high honors until the day I smoked weed for the first time in the summer between 8th grade and high school.
Okay.
So it really took off there. That summer, I met my friend, guy who was about a year older than me. He sold weed. We would hang out. I'd ride my bike over his house. We'd smoke weed every night. Then me and my brother would smoke weed and all that. And I smoked weed every single day that summer without a day off. And like going into high school, I was like, wow, like, what's this going to look like? My friend, who later passed away at 16, he bought a car, and he used to have a car in his driveway. He bought a car with the money that he made from selling weed, but didn't have a license at 15. So we would sit in his car and smoke weed and talk about all the places we're going to drive and go. Once he got his license, he died in a car crash. He took that little beat-up Jetta, going 100 up a entrance ramp to a highway and passed away drunk driving. And that was one of the first people I lost in my life to drugs and alcohol. That was really, really difficult. I lost my grandmother at 16, so drugs and alcohol really kind of spiraled from that. I didn't know how to grieve. Grieving wasn't a thing in my family. The men didn't kind of talk about that thing. Stereotypical grandfather was a World War II veteran. On one side, then my other grandfather was a sergeant in a police department. That tough type of kind of thing was kind of passed down. There was always, drugs and alcohol in and out of my life. There was family members that were in and out of my life. Grief was a kind of a thing that was done behind closed doors. There was always chaos in the family because of drugs and alcohol, through whatever, avenues of my family or whatever parts of my family. Chaos was always a part of my life, and chaos was always a part of my drinking and drugging. At that point, right before he passed away, we started to get into oxycodone pills. When I was 15, I was in a fist fight with my younger brother. We fist fought literally every day over everything.
I have to laugh because I know your brother.
Yes. Everything was a fist fight, kind of like the tough-natured family. And I swung at him, missed, and hit the corner of a wall, and I broke my 4th and 5th metacarpal. And I went to the doctor. They gave me a script of 90 pain pills, 90 Vicodin 7.5s. I got home, and I remember watching my dad go to my mom, who they've since been divorced for, 12 years at this point. He looks at her, he's like, hey, shoveling snow recently, my back's real sore, it hurts, I need a couple of those, right? And I'm watching him work my mom, like I'm watching it happen in real time. I'm like, oh, those got to be good,
Right.
So I picked up on it. I waited till she left them in her purse because she immediately tried to hide them. And I took like half of them. I remember taking a whole bunch of them that night and having one of my first highs where I was nodding out, watching a movie, and waking up that next day. I knew that this was something that I wanted to experience literally every day for the rest of my life.
I find that very interesting because you first experimented with weed. So you smoked. And I'm assuming you were maybe 13 years old roughly. And yep. You kind of had this addictive-like process to it. Like you enjoyed the effect that the substance produced on your body. Is that fair to say?
Yes, loved it.
And then you experience, we could argue, but a derivative of heroin, a synthetic derivative that produces a euphoric-like feeling that heroin does. In fact, biologically, it's almost the exact same. Did you love weed?
Yeah.
And you loved pills.
Yep.
Okay. So then, once you take this pill, what effect did it produce on you in the sense of actively pursuing or seeking this substance or other substances, right? See, it sounds like weed was kind of a gateway, as much as people don't like to hear that, but it was the most elementary drug that was socially accepted that produced a extreme change on you. Mm-hmm. And now you get this other one. So I guess I'm kind of interested in understanding what happened once you started taking the pills. Like what physiological or mental changes started to occur, because now you have 2, maybe 3 substances that you've tried that you're like, this is different and I like it.
It's a great question. So it brings up nature versus nurture. So nature-wise, I'm predispositioned from basically every male in my family has struggled with addiction. So I'm automatically predispositioned for my brain to work that way. Nurture-wise, I was born by addicts, raised by addicts. So the likelihood of me falling into a point of addiction was high, right? And then the other thing is studies show that the younger a person is introduced to substances, the more likely they are to become addicted. So me at 15 years old, experiencing my first bouts of, substance use kind of led me down this path that, whether you want to say it was nature versus nurture, I think it's a little bit of both. I think I was born with this mindset, because the thing was, is I got a job the day I turned 16. I basically worked for the majority of my life, right? Like there were times where I was so, addicted to substances I could not work, and I resorted to hustling and stealing. I was raised with work ethic, right? Both my parents went to work every day regardless of whatever. My dad was always a great worker. All the men in my life were always great workers. My stepfather was a great worker. But I was also trained to if you're going to do substances, you're going to have to, it doesn't mean that you can't go to work, right?
Understood.
So it was
a functional addict, as some people will say.
Yes.
And I always like to debate that because I'm like, well, people function on different levels. So
yes,
it's all relative. But you have this experience, right, lived, and then arguably biologically, right? Mm-hmm. And I think anytime we're looking that far into the weeds to try to dissect it, we're missing the forest for the trees.
That's right, yes.
Right? So I'm glad that you structured your experience that way.
Yes.
But you break your knuckle, and now you take this Vicodin, and are things different for you, or
immediately?
Where are you? Okay, so immediately, what was going on? You take this Vicodin, then
it exposed me to a whole new level of substances at 15, and then getting into it with my buddy and having that conversation with him, right? The kid who had passed away, right? It's like, oh yeah, dude, I was messing with it. I was like, oh, we got, I can get those all the time. I love those things, And then he's also like, yeah, dude, I love sniffing coke. You ever seen that movie Blow? And then it's like, okay, then we would start to experiment with all these things, and then basically going from friends who only smoked weed to friends who were more willing to participate in heavier, more illicit substances, right? And that experience kind of opened me up to, me being a younger kid, kind of hanging out with the older crowd, watching these people and the way they interact and the way that they live their life, right? Being in high school and starting to hustle, starting to, get into the whole kind of thing, right? Because when I was in high school, opiates were in full effect, right? So I could, as a person who sold weed, I could go to somebody and be like, hey, listen, I bought an ounce of mids for $100, right? I could give you because every kid at this time was getting their wisdom teeth out and would have 30 Percocet 5s. But listen, man, I could break you off with an eighth, right? So I would pay $25 basically for a knuckle of pills, right? Like a whole sack of pills. And then I would get high and sell the pills at $5, $6, $7 a pop and sell weed, right? So I could get pills for cheap because everybody had them all the time. People were snatching them from medicine cabinets. And then it kind of leads on to cocaine and getting into cocaine and what was that like? And taking my first couple of key bumps, and it's like, wow, little cocaine, little pills, smoking some weed and drinking alcohol, and kind of really just being 100% willing to experiment with all these things, getting caught multiple times by my parents, and going to treatment at a young age. And
How old were you the first time you entered? So you're doing this stuff. You're doing, so first the weed, as you're going into high school, then you get the pills, birds of a feather flock together,
Always.
right? Community is a huge influence, right?
Yes.
I love when people try to contest or debate this idea of community, because if you are hanging around people long enough, they're influences, just like it could be in recovery.
Yep.
Right? And so you're more apt or more willing to try certain things because your buddies are doing them. And then, I was also the type of guy that I don't discriminate. You got a little blow? Okay, let's test this out. And I can really relate to what you had said about that. I remember the first time that I did it, I think I was a senior in high school. And I literally stood up with the 4 other people that were with me and was like, I feel like Superman. Like literally. Yeah, right? And well, we know how the story goes for me. But for you, you're having these experiences in high school, and then you enter treatment at what age? Like what's
14.
the process? Okay.
So mom got me into an IOP right away.
So this is, you entered treatment before you tried pills for the first time.
Yes, because she knew I was like...
And that's why you didn't have access to the pills, but when you saw your father expressing an interest, you kind of perked up.
I was starting to dabble at that point, 14 to 15.
Okay.
And then getting into that, then back in IOP again at 16.
Okay.
And then really I was in some form of treatment 16 to 17. Barely graduated high school. Crazy story. So I was in a relationship so I was 18 at the time. I was going to high school. I was in a relationship with my high school teacher from 18 to like 19 and a half. We dated for about a year and a half. She was 24. She had just graduated college and came in, and we hooked up. And, she liked a little bit of the fast lifestyle. She, seen some of it. She knew like I was a hustler. I was around and I loved getting fucked up. And when I graduated, we really got together. Mm-hmm. From there, we dated for a year and a half, and she watched the lifestyle, hey, don't ask no questions. And she had an apartment, and I lived with my parents at the time, and I didn't want to hide a bunch of shit at my parents' house, so I'd go pick up in Hartford, because then at this point, I got into dope at 16, 17.
Okay.
So I was fully strung out on heroin at 17. No needles, just sniffing it. But I had to sell it. I had to use it. I was going into Hartford. I lived in a typical white suburban community. Mm-hmm. And I was the one who wasn't afraid to go to Hartford. So I made a lot of money on the tax that I went into Hartford to get a bunch of dope. If you want it, it's double what I paid for it. And
take it or leave it.
Yep. And everybody took it because there's as many people who liked the substance. It funded my lifestyle, brought in a lot of cash at the time. I couldn't keep a job, I would get all these jobs and work hard at work, but the things that drugs and alcohol brought would cause me to lose these jobs.
Of course.
And she would always try to get me to get a job. And then I'd come over and I'd have pocket full of cash, and it's I'm digging in the closet to leave something. I'm like, don't fucking come in here, you know what I mean? Don't look in here, and it's well, what are you putting in there, and that lifestyle of hey, listen, I gotta step out. I'm gonna walk down the street for a second to smoke a cigarette, and it's where are you going? And
and you're smoking a cigarette every 45 minutes. Yeah, no, it resonates.
So a lifestyle that's really, the thing was too is she I don't want to say she was sick. She had her own things, so mm-hmm. She was trying to really start a family and all that stuff. And I'm 18 years old, and that was, not really, the addiction and heroin addiction and starting a family don't go well. So after about a year and a half of craziness and, fights and things being thrown around the room and all that type of stuff, and, people coming at all times of the night and me nodding out with cigarettes and smoking in the house and this whole thing, we split ways. I was 19, and then eventually I moved in with my dad and got into needles at 19.
Okay.
And then that was all downhill. So with me, every time I stick a needle in my arm, I will be in prison or treatment in 90 days. You can set your watch to it.
And when you say needles, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. When you say needles, you're talking about using fentanyl or heroin. Well, at the time, I know how it's kind of convoluted, but
intravenous drug use.
Intravenous drug use. Okay. So would you speedball, or would you?
I love speedballing. So a dash of fentanyl and a dash of coke every half an hour. You know, the thing is fentanyl makes you black out real quick, intravenously. So like a lot of times, like we would, you know, like. Then I wasn't a big blackout person. Like I never really drank the blackout. I drank to oblivion, but I never really had a lot of blackouts. But like the process with fentanyl now is, I've been sober for almost 9 years. Fentanyl was really starting to take off at the end, right before I got sober.
Yes, it was.
There's no real dope. Like it was all fentanyl, right? Like when I first started, it was brown dope. You know what I mean? It smelled a certain way, it tasted a certain way, and you knew this was real legit heroin. You could take a look at it in like the little wax baggies and know that this is heroin. At a certain point, it's like this white, like real, not like flaky substance. It's like real powdery, you know, and you know that it's like, and it tasted like Windex, you know, and like you knew that this whole thing was not the same. You got really high, but you knew this wasn't the same type of dope that you started using.
I find that so interesting because I know that we've talked, but for me, I was so fixated on the pills because of the process, but also like the flavor and taste.
Yes.
And it's interesting, I don't remember what it was like the first time I did it because it probably tastes gross. But the point was, I had grown so accustomed to it that I learned to almost ritualize the process.
Yes.
Even of getting, using, the taste, the whole situation. Which I find fascinating because we, as addicts, and I don't want to speak for everyone, so I guess I'll speak for myself. One thing I've identified amongst addicts is we could be very process and detail oriented depending on how we channel our energy.
Being sober for 9 years, I do the same exact thing every single morning. Then when I had my daughter, it changed, but the first thing I do is when my kid wakes me up in the morning, we get up, we go downstairs, I hit the coffee pot, I bring her in, I get her cran apple juice, 1/4 with 3/4 water, vanilla wafers, and I sit her down and she watches Bluey, the same thing every single day. I get up, I get my cup of coffee, I stand out my back porch, I say a prayer to God, I take about 90 seconds, and I have a cigarette with my coffee. Literally every single day.
Interesting.
Right, and it's the same thing. So, like as a human, like humans, right, we're naturally created to enjoy process, right? Like it's what the type of thing that we live in for whatever reason. Like for me, it just works. It works very well. I love the same type of coffee.
Well, I do think, you know, I don't want to go too far down the wormhole because I'm really not too educated on this, but I guess you could even relate that to like circadian rhythm and sleep patterns and stuff like that, right?
Yes.
You know, at 19 years old, roughly 19 or 20, where are you mentally, physically, spiritually? Give us a quick snapshot of where you are at 19 years old, getting out of this relationship.
That's such a great question, and it's hard to, you know, I felt like a basement dweller. Right? Like I lived in my father's basement, you know, and every day was get centered around getting and using substances.
Okay.
So I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't really keep good friendships and relationships. People were always worried about me because like they see the spiral. I lose a bunch of weight. I look horrible. And at 19, I committed a real bad felony. I stole a couple of guns and I sold them to a drug dealer to get dope. I get picked up on that. Sent to Hartford County, $100,000 bond, and eventually to MYI. And then at that point, I kind of really started the process of in and out. So getting sober at 22 and still having the effects of a decision I made at 19 beyond me. I spent 7.5 consecutive years either in jail, out on bond, on parole, or on probation from that day in February when I get arrested.
Okay.
So 2014, right after the Super Bowl. And like at that point, getting picked up by the police and stuff, I really just gave up. You know, I'm probably about 120 pounds soaking wet. My arms are black and blue from shooting dope. You know, I don't have any relationships with anybody. My parents are consistently worried about me and just letting me go. And like, I remember getting into prison and feeling freedom for the first time, which is crazy.
I know that feeling. And every single person that I've told that to says you're out of your mind. But it almost forced me in a position to submit.
Yep.
Because depending on where you are, you might be able to get and use, but it's not going to be like it was out there.
I never used in jail, and the thing was, is like you can, I mean, I dabbled with certain things, like we would fuck around with certain, you know what I mean, but like nothing, like I didn't really use substances. Maybe I dabbled with something, I can't really remember because it was so long ago. It was like 12 years ago at this point, but I never used dope because you couldn't, I couldn't shoot dope the way I want to rip down 5 bags, you know what I mean, in a single shot. Like that was the goal, right? Is like, you don't have access to that, but like being free from the substance for the first time and being like, wow, like life is a little fucking better without this, and like
the phone's not blowing up.
Yep.
You're not dodging this to get that or going here instead of there. It's the chaos. I always refer to it as chaos, right? It's so extremely challenging to manage life in any semblance of a functional way when you're getting, using, abusing, when you're doing what I define as addict behavior. You're doing a substance or a process despite the negative consequences.
Yes.
Right? You're not just using, you're not abusing, you're active addiction, and all bets are off.
You're willing to accept the consequences because the substance is so powerful and has such a powerful hold of your life.
The grips of addiction.
And for me that happened, and I like telling this story because so getting in, so like people don't, we hear the term powerlessness thrown around a lot, right? And like, what does that mean, right? It's like the first word and the first step, right, that stands out that a lot of people in 12-step community and all that stuff, and like powerlessness, like what does that actually mean to me, right? And like you could bring me back, right? And like that first time picking up that blue phone in prison and calling my mother and being like, Mom, I swear to God, I'll never do this ever again in my entire life, right?
I wonder how many times that's been said into that phone though. Was that really where you were?
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. So like I make that phone call, right? And you could bring me back to court and put my hand on the Bible and make me swear to God in front of everybody I'll never use substances again ever in my entire life. I remember going to court and like judge sending me off to a program, and the judge he goes, we're gonna give you an opportunity today, Mr. Aitken, blah, 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 blah. I'll tell you one thing, if you screw this up, you won't be able to count the number of years I'll give you on one hand, and like being like, wow, okay, like this is real. And going through 6 months of prison, going to a 90-day program and sitting in this program and everybody telling me every day for 40 hours a week, if you leave here, drink alcohol, you will use heroin again. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I left that program. I got picked up by my stepdad at 10 o'clock in the morning. He brought me right over to a meeting at the bottom of Main Street in Manchester. I got the chip, I got the books, I got the hug, I left, and I went home and I drank. Right? Like that's powerlessness, because what really makes me powerless is that when I tell that to everybody else, I believe it, right? Is that I truly believed I was never going to do that again. And then here I am out on, a promise to appear to finish treatment drinking. Right? And then that continuing to escalate to getting locked back up and doing another, doing some more time and going through that process and being like, wow, like that was kind of fucked up. I'll never do that again. And then getting out and making it 17 days before picking up again.
Why do you think that you got to a point where you were so convinced that you were not going to use again? Was it, I wasn't going to use heroin and I thought I could drink? Or was it, I want to get the hell out of this situation right now by any means? Or was it a combination? Give me a little snapshot of where your head was when you made that phone call home and then went in front of a judge essentially saying that you're going to abide by these conditions, but yet you didn't.
So, that's a good question a lot there. I think for me, it really boils down to my inability to handle life and the situations in life without substances. I think I needed to learn that process over time. Also unwilling to accept defeat, right? Like looking at this and like, hey, I think that it will be different this time because, whatever situation or, insert whatever lie I told myself. And then eventually coming to the point where spiritual bankruptcy, right? Like I think I was physically bankrupt, I think I was morally bankrupt, but I didn't know I was spiritually bankrupt, right? We're like looking at this, like getting back into my story, right? So getting out and experiencing all that, and then like being on probation and ducking probation and all that, and like kind of starting to get some experience in recovery, and dabbling in recovery, doing the little 30-day, 60-day shuffle, 30 in, 30 out, 30 in, 30 out. Job car girl drunk, job car girl strung out on heroin. Burn it down as fast as I can build it. Being really at my turning point at 22 years old and spiritually bankrupt, right? At a certain point, I'm like looking at this situation. I didn't want to get sober, but I didn't want to live like this, right? And I knew that I looked at this and I said, I'm going to give this a big enough shot and make everybody believe it. And then once they believe it and they buy it and everybody gets off my ass, I'm going to drink again. I'm never going to do heroin. I'm never going to do cocaine, but I'll drink again. Maybe smoke weed. We'll see what it looks like when I get there, if I'm on non-reporting probation or not.
In essence, you're creating this blueprint that can work for you to abuse substances while you're being monitored.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what led me to detox my last time, where I detoxed cold turkey in Rushford and Middletown. Back then, fentanyl would not show up in the test strips. So I pee in a cup. They're like, yep, you tested positive for everything but opiates. And I was like, well, I shot up 45 minutes ago and I'm fucking high, nodding out in your lobby. How is this possible? They were like, well, fentanyl doesn't register on a flip cup urine, so we can't give you any of these certain medications. You can get Tylenol and possibly some Benadryl for anxiety, basically visceral. And I'm like, well, this is bullshit. I'm out of here. And the guys that were with me were like, no, we're leaving without you. So you can stay or you can walk home. And it was a 36-mile walk from Manchester to Middletown. So I trooped it out and I stayed and I kicked fentanyl cold turkey with visceral, basically Benadryl, and Tylenol.
And this was at Rushford and Middletown?
Yep.
Okay.
Clonidine as well, like a blood pressure medicine to make sure I didn't have a heart attack coming off the stuff. But the likelihood is slim to none.
Right.
I was 120 pounds again. I was black and blue, all up and down my arms. The air conditioning was broken at this time in the building, so it was like literally like 85 degrees, and I'm in there in sweatpants and a sweatshirt.
Freezing.
Freezing. My feet hurt so bad I couldn't take my shoes off to get in bed, so I'm literally in bed with shoes on.
Or the restless legs.
Restless legs.
Yeah.
And I laid in bed and I kicked, and they came and picked me up 3 days later, and I started my journey of recovery.
Historically, I've taken pride in toughing things out, right? Whether it's athletically, whether it's getting through situations. It's something I do internally. Mm-hmm. But you can't die from opioid withdrawal.
Correct.
You can die from benzo withdrawal.
Yep.
And alcohol withdrawal.
Yes.
But with that being said, the level of discomfort that I felt while I'm going through opiate withdrawal, I can't explain, because I can tough things out, right? And you tough things out to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
But
and God did for me what I couldn't do for myself.
You take that into account.
Yes.
And then you add in a couple alternative medications that are helpful in this process.
Kind of.
Does it help or hurt?
It helps.
So it helps facilitate the process.
The only thing that alleviates the sickness is opiates. Right? So everything else is kind of like take it or leave it.
Right. But I guess more so the point I'm getting to is under supervision, with low-level medication, it is possible to get opioids or opiates out of your system.
Correct.
And into a program that can teach fundamental skills at staying sober.
They can effectively help you start the process of recovery, right? So like for me, like there's always the, and a lot of people too, we look at certain things and we're like, oh, been in treatment, I'm cured, I just got to get out and get a job and get going, right?
Right.
And it doesn't work like that. Like they're effectively setting you up with a process that you're going to help utilize getting going, right? Like they're helping you take off. Like they're like putting gas in the plane and they're checking the wheels and the tires, and then it's like go off. But you have to navigate flying this plane and not crashing.
But you're in a rehab, right?
Yep.
And you had been in rehabs prior,
Oh,
right?
of course.
What was different this time? So you start withdrawing through the medication. You're at Rushford, which is what, like 28 days or 45 or something?
No, I just stayed for detox. I got picked up 3 days later.
Okay, so it was one of those 5-day types of detoxes or 3-day type detoxes?
5, but I was basically like cut the cord on the 4th day. I was in there the 4th morning. I'm like, but so here's the deal. I'm sitting in that detox and I'm thinking like, I'm never going to use dope again, but like I'm going to sell it hard enough. I'm going to work this thing hard enough to sell it to everybody, right? And when they buy it, when everybody buys it and everybody takes their eyes off me, I'm going to use again. Not dope, but I'm going to drink and smoke weed.
Okay.
So getting into 12-step recovery and going to a lot of early morning meetings and being the most miserable person in the room, right? And like this whole process of like finding my first couple of sober friends and like still being like in my first 30 days in recovery and like being like, yeah, like I can't fucking wait to get, and not enjoying meetings. And I think like, I like to say that I'm a product of osmosis. My ass sat in the seat long enough that my thinking actually started to change, right? Because like, I was so sick. I heard somebody talk about it one time and it really resonates with me. It was like catching a cold, right? I was so sick I needed to get around the well and catch the well, right? And catch recovery, right? Like recovery is contagious.
Your circle of influence.
Yes. And like watching these people really like live this wonderful life and be sober at the same time. And then having those people be an influence on me and like, getting into a lot of the nitty gritty and the step work and doing all that and like doing it to appease other people. And like the thing about recovery is for me, the biggest point of it is it's not about intention, it's about action, right? That it didn't matter what my intentions in the beginning was, it was what my actions in the beginning were, right? Whether I was getting sober to save whatever, like get some wheels on the road so I wasn't walking everywhere, begging my stepdad to drive me somewhere, or like take me to the mall so I can get a new pair of sneakers or whatever, right? Like I did the things that I had to do. It didn't matter why I did them, but I did them. I went to a lot of meetings, I got a sponsor, I started to do step work. I really started to like really essentially rebuild my life. I got my first job in recovery. I was washing dishes at a bar, then eventually making pizza. Right? And like, I lived this nice little life. I was living with my parents at the time. I started to volunteer at CCAR, right? I knew that if I went to this place and did some volunteer work a couple of days a week, like in between work and going to meetings and stuff, that it was positive for my recovery and I didn't want to drink or drug there. And there were people in there that were really, really big influences on me and talked to me about recovery coaching and becoming a recovery coach. Did I ever actually think I was going to be a recovery coach? Hell no. But I did the things to become a recovery coach, right?
So based on your experience, is it safe to say that intention without action will not give you your desired result?
Yes, it didn't matter about intention. It was all about action.
But you can't have action without intention.
So correct, my intention wasn't the direct intention like others were, right? Like other people came in and they were like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober. I never want to feel like this ever again in my entire life. I just wanted to get everybody off my ass, right? And I did the same thing that person did, and we both stayed sober.
Okay.
Right?
And I see how those two blended together.
Yes.
I've heard people say in recovery, fake it till you make it.
That's it.
What does that actually mean? That's what you were doing?
Essentially faking it till you make it, right? Like, I didn't know how to stay sober. I didn't know any of this process, but what I did is I got up in the morning. My mom would wake me up every morning, 6:30, get up or get out, right? I either had to get up and go to a meeting or get the fuck out of her house, right? And I would get up and I'd go to the 7 a.m. meeting. And then I got around some people who were like, oh, like, you need a ride? I was like, yeah, dude, I'd love a ride. So I got around these guys that would show up at my house literally every single day at 6:30 or 6:45 and pick me up and take me to the 7 a.m. meeting in Pathfinders.
So we had crossed paths in August of 2016.
Yep.
You got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And at what point did you feel as though you made a true commitment to recovery and staying sober?
So that's a great question. And I can't pinpoint the exact piece, but for me, it really started around the process of working a moral inventory. And that's a big piece of 12-step recovery, and that's one of the things we refer to as the 4-step. And in that, doing that searching and fearless moral inventory, I took a look at my life, and I was able to overcome the fears and the anger and the resentments and stop blaming everybody for the problems of my own making, and really get into this way of living that I didn't feel a sense of dread or anger or fear or remorse, or when I did, I was able to have the skills to work through it and look at my life today in a realistic sense, right? My sponsor talks about it as like rejoining the human race. Like I was able to have those conversations with people. I was able to walk in the grocery store and feel a part of the community, right? And experience that. And at some point in that process, I woke up and my first thought wasn't drugs or alcohol. Later in the day, I probably thought about drugs or alcohol, but it was a passing thought. And then the next day, I didn't think about it at all. And I woke up and I was like, wow, and I could make it to the coffee pot without a drink or a drug, and I could make it to wherever in my life without a drink or a drug, and enjoy who I was as a person, and kind of stop the point of obsession where drugs and alcohol was so more important than anything in my life.
So out of respect for the anonymity around the 12-step communities that exist, but also highlighting other pathways to recovery, right? There's Recovery 2.0, there's Buddhist-based recoveries, there's a litany of them, right? You
Yes.
can do CBT on more on the clinical side, but what I find interesting is whether we start over on the clinical side, right? Or we start more on a 12-step community side, they kind of meet in the middle in that they have an introspective and reflective process that involves some level of amends making, both with yourself, the outside world, but also having the individual take on a internal locus of control, right?
Yes.
Looking at what their part and roles within certain scenarios are, right?
Yes.
It's funny because I've heard people say, the common denominator in all these problems is really you.
Yes.
And so you get to this point where you're actively pursuing recovery-based processes, not just hanging around, and you're having this introspective approach as to your role and your position in the world and all these situations that identify your life, and what came from that process. And I guess, what was the design of moving forward through this process? So you do some step work, and then do you do it again? Do you help other people? What's the design of building a life in recovery look like as you're navigating through the steps in this recovery sphere?
So the first thing I needed to do was let go of self-pity. So I blamed everybody else for my own problems. My mother this, my father that, my brother this. If these things didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be the person that, and like that type of thinking.
The victim of the world.
Victim of the world, right? Could not make it work, whatever it was. And it's like, no, you couldn't make it work because you're unwilling to do whatever, right? So letting go of self-pity. The other thing is like anger and resentment, right? Go hand in hand with fear, right? So like basically I was afraid to live a life that I wanted to live, and in the same point I was angry at everybody else, right?
It's easier to blame other people. It always is.
Always. And letting go of those two things and kind of joining this process, like, all right, like I kind of want to be a recovery coach, right? And I'm working at this, kind of dead-end job and making pizza and washing dishes and doing this type of stuff and getting really big in the 12-step community and starting to sponsor other men and support other men and, getting in that small, tight-knit community and kind of starting to find myself in like a leadership role and supporting other young men who are like beginning the recovery process at a young age, like I did, like 22 years old. And, that process of like looking at other people and like hating something I see in them is really like something that I hate seeing in myself, right? It's an introspective process. So when I help them work through those things, I myself work through those things as well, right? And I watch the actions of other people. When I watch what they do and I'm like, that really agitates me. It's like I need to look in the mirror here, right? It's something I don't like about myself. One finger pointed at you, three pointed back at me, right? So I learned that process of like helping support other people, taking them through 12-step work, getting my first job in the recovery field as a recovery coach and working in, I started in hospitals and, pulling up the people post-overdose and be like, hey, I'm TJ, I'm in recovery and like I'm a recovery coach and I'm here to support you in your recovery. What can I do to help you in your recovery today, right? And like allowing people the space to work through what they're going through and like help them find treatment, help them find resources in the community, and like do those types of things. You know, that was a really, really cool experience for me.
Working in a hospital system with substance abuse treatment and like facilitation of that is not easy.
No.
I've seen firsthand experiences of people at CCAR in some interesting situations. Let's just say that, right?
Yes.
So you're in recovery, you're seeking long-term recovery on a day-to-day basis. You're also working in recovery with CCAR. You're in the hospital system. How do you approach individuals in the hospital system who are in there for substance abuse related situations? How do you approach them with open arms and not as though you have the prescription that's going to fix them?
I think back to myself in early recovery and the way that the men in the 12-step program worked around with me, where I never felt like I was forced to do anything. I felt like I had a choice and an option and everything, right? And it really comes down to the art of recovery coaching, right? You have to have emotional intelligence in the way that we talk to people. If I was addicted to heroin and laying on a hospital bed and unsure if I needed help, if a person came in and told me what I needed to do, it would have never worked, right? I think back to the first person I ever helped in the emergency room. It was a guy, he had overdosed in a porta potty at work, and they Narcaned him and brought him back to life. He had a couple of kids, he was married, great guy. I pull up into this hospital, you know, my little tie on, I'm 23, 24, kind of starting this process. I have no idea what I'm doing. And the truth is I knew exactly what to do, right? I just needed to trust the process within myself. And I pull up a chair and this man won't look at me. His wife's sitting in the chair right next to him crying and crying and crying and like, we have to make this work. We have to make this work. And he literally won't look at me. He's sitting in the hospital bed like this. And I pulled up to him and I didn't beg him to go to treatment. I didn't ask him what he needed. I asked him a couple of questions and he didn't really want to engage with me. And I felt it. And I looked up and I said, listen, brother, recovery is like the number one. You can take that number and you can put anything behind it and you can grow that number into 1,000,000. But if you take away that one, you take away that recovery, you have nothing in this world. I understand you don't want to go to treatment right now, and I understand there's a lot of stuff going on in your life, and I want to give you that space to navigate this. Here's my card. If there's something I can do to help you in your recovery, I would absolutely love to do so. If you want some support, if you want some guidance, if you want some connection, I would love to do that, right? He lived exactly by where I used to live and exactly where I got sober, right? And I made that connection with him, and I stood up and I shook his hand and I gave his wife a hug, and I said, let's, we can work this out. I called him the next day, he didn't pick up. 7 a.m. the next day, my phone rang. And he said, I can't get what you said to me out of my head, and I'm willing to do anything that it takes to get sober. And I said, let's do this. What do you want to do? He goes, I have no clue. What would you do if you were in my shoes? And I said, hey, listen, you're not working. You just got let go of your job, right? You're navigating getting a new job. Why don't you start your day in recovery? Do you like meetings? He said, yeah, I do like meetings, actually. I've always felt good in meetings. I said, there's a 7 a.m. meeting that I used to hit every day. I know a bunch of people over there, they're real good. Go, try it out, and if you don't like it, you never got to go ever again. You only lose 1 hour of your life, and you still have 23 hours left in the day to do whatever you want for your recovery. Give it a shot. He said, I love that idea. Let's do it. He went to the 7 a.m. meeting. He got connected. He did his whole thing. He met all the guys. He loved that community. He's been a part of the sober community for a while, doing great. I remember this was November. He went to the Pathfinder's Christmas party, and that's where all the people in the recovery community buy gifts for all the other people in the recovery community and their kids. I walk into the Pathfinder's recovery community. I walk into the Pathfinder's building, and he's there, and his wife's crying, and she looks over to me, and she's like, thank you. And I felt so fulfilled in that, and it was never about money. It was never about anything else. I just knew that in my life I would always feel fulfilled if I helped support other people. And if I made that connection, right, and I think that's like one of the biggest things that CCAR does, is it bridges the gap between the treatment community and the actual recovery community, or like this community and the recovery community, and I was that bridge, right? And I helped that guy get over that bridge.
Absolutely. I find it interesting because I think that sometimes people can maybe come off as a little pretentious, that they might understand or they might have the best method or approach in actively seeking or navigating sobriety, and that's really ego. But when we really boil it down for this individual guy, it was something a little more simple, like getting connected with community. Now, I know that I've reached out to you about getting people into rehab facilities and facilitating that process. What is the design of doing that for you with CCAR? Professionally, personally, how do you navigate getting people into professional services like rehabs with CCAR?
That's another great question. You got to grease the wheel, right? So you have to learn how to utilize the system. So for me, I had to go through a process of calling all these places consistently and talking to them and figuring out what the criteria is for somebody to get in.
So these places being state-run facilities or private facilities, or what's the design of that?
Both,
Okay.
right? So you have to be able to, as a recovery coach, you have to be able to navigate somebody getting in regardless of the barriers,
Okay.
right?
So you're facilitating the introduction and you're trying to streamline the process for them because they've expressed a will in either through insurance or private funds, whatever the design of that is. You are facilitating that introduction and getting them a spot.
Correct.
Okay.
If that's what they want to do.
If they want to do it.
Right,
Understood.
because like a lot of times, like how many times have so for me, I had been to treatment so many times, right? I literally needed 3 days. I needed to get the shit out of my system, right?
Well, you needed 3 days after like 3 times.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing, right? I had been to treatment 100 times. I literally...
How many really? How many times were you really in treatment before this 3-day detox that was the springboard to investing in your recovery?
Couple of inpatients. I went to the same program, the same outpatient program 9 times before I got sober, right? And like I remember that last time and sitting there and like being in there talking about, man, I think I kind of want to go to some of these recovery coaching classes at CCAR, I want to, whatever. And then talking about that in group and this and that. And then we did SPIES plans. So spiritual, physical, intellectual, education, and social health planning for the weekend.
Okay.
What are you going to do to fill your cup this weekend and stay sober? And I sat there and he handed me the paper and I was like, dude, I'm not doing this shit. Like, I'm done. Like, I've done this shit so many times, I can teach that. And he like continues passing out the papers and he looks back and he goes, why don't you? Why don't you actually go out and do something with your recovery for the first time in your entire life? And then took a seat and said, all right, so we're going to continue our SPIES plans. And I'm like, damn, like, hit me like a dagger through the heart. I'm like, why don't I actually do that? And like, I remember going home that weekend and being like, is this my life? Is this my life? Like sitting in fucking outpatient treatment all the time, every day. Like I felt like I was never not in treatment. Like from the time I was 14 years old, I always felt like I was in treatment, right? And I'm like, why don't I actually go out and do something with my recovery, right? And I walked into CCAR and I started the process of like becoming a recovery coach. Did I have any idea if I knew exactly what I was gonna do with it? No. I just knew that this would work, right? And I walked in there with some faith and like I started that process, right? And I didn't even really want to stay sober at that point, right? I was 30 days sober. I just knew I had to do something, right? And action and intention, right? I didn't have all this great intention, right? Like I kind of wanted to just sell it, right? Like I just wanted to work recovery enough that everybody else believed it, but I still did it, right? I still went and I took that class. I still had a little bit of an open mind and I still came to that process. And I did everything that I needed to do to become a recovery coach.
I think that's awesome because I do know that CCAR has their own recovery coaching program.
Yep.
On top of that, you are actively pursuing recovery during your time outside of work.
My first 3 years of recovery, I worked as a recovery coach. I literally went to a meeting every day, right? Like I had seen so many people and so much stuff and I just had so much going on and I was young and I was single, but dating at the time and like dating, and doing whatever. I just found myself in a meeting literally every single night. Like there was not much else to do with my, with what was going on, right? And like I felt comfortable in that place and like kind of brought me to a point of like a bubble too, we're at like 3-4 years of recovery. Like I felt like if I stepped outside of this bubble, like I didn't know what was going to happen, right? So it did create a point of fear. And then we lost one of our brothers to an overdose. He had been sober for 18 months. He picked up one pill one time. He smoked it. It was laced with fentanyl. He overdosed and died. And he used to do this thing. He lived life without fear. You know, this kid, he was awesome. He used to play this game called, when was the last time you did something for the first time? So he started this game. Everybody would call each other and be like, hey, man, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And you'd be like, man, I don't know, man. And then he'd be like, have you ever been to wherever? So after he died, I was kind of like, damn, like I was processing this whole thing and like kind of felt stuck in this bubble a little bit. Then I started to pick up the phone and talk to people, and somebody played this game with me, and they were like, when was the last time you did something for the first time? I was like, I don't know, man. And they're like, you ever been to Miami? And I was like, no. They're like, I haven't either. Let's go. We literally booked a resort in Miami. And I flew down to Miami, and I went to a Miami Heat game in the middle of COVID, and it was me and like 5,000 people watching the Miami Heat play in this huge arena, and like, went out and seen a guy I used to sponsor in 12-step recovery. He lived in West Palm at the time. Went down, seen him, spent some time, spent a day at a resort. Went out on the beach in Miami, walked the boardwalk in Miami, had a great time, hit some meetings down there, did all kinds of fun stuff, right? Like I'd escaped that little bubble that I felt that I was stuck in.
I find that really interesting because it's almost the same bubble that you had when you were in active addiction and the same fear, right? Mm-hmm. But now you're living completely differently. Your lifestyles, your habits, everything truly embodies a different approach, and a recovery-based approach, to be fair, yes. Right? It was the design of your life. But stepping outside of that or inviting other people into your social circle that might not be active in recovery was a particularly tricky process for myself, but you're going through that. Now, I know that you're a father.
Yes.
And what I'm really interested is understanding how your personal experience and professional experience in recovery has impacted you as a father.
We talked a lot about fear, and that's a big thing, right? So I think about 2 quick stories with fear. Number 1, I grew up with Doberman Pinschers. I love them. I think they're the best dog breed in the entire world. And I always used to say, if I'm actually going to get sober, I should get a Doberman so I could take all my time and all my energy and focus it in this dog and not myself, right? Obviously, that never would have worked. But when I was a couple years sober, I was looking at my now wife, and she was talking about starting a family. I was like, listen, we haven't even gotten a dog yet. I want a dog. I think it's important to raise a kid with a dog. I wanted, the only dog I would get would be a purebred European female Doberman, right? To the exact T. She's like, okay, well, let's look at it. We literally found a breeder. I called them. We got on the phone. We made the deposit for the dog. We set up a pickup date. We got everything set up, right? And the second we hung up that phone, she's like, oh my God, we just bought a dog. And I'm like, immediately struck with fear, right? Like, I'm like, is this dog going to love me? Am I ever going to be able to leave the house again? I have no idea how to train this dog. Like, what is this life going to be like? And I spent the next 2 months every day dreaded with fear, right? I remember the day the dog delivery van pulls up, they come out and they put her in her cage, and I sign for her, and they're like, hey, congratulations on your new dog. They get in the van and they drive away, and I'm sitting there and there's little puppies in this crate, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, like, what decision did I just make? And I reach into the crate and I pick this dog up and I hold her up like this, and I'm looking at her, and she pisses all over me. And immediately I knew I was in love, and I love that dog, and that dog's been one of my best friends for the last 5 years. And I worked my ass off, and we trained that dog, and I spent so much time and energy invested in my dog. Is amazing, and I love that dog, and having that dog in my life is so important, right? And if I could regret one thing, it's looking back at that and not spending all that time in fear, and as opposed to looking at the excitement of like, wow, this is a new chapter and a new phase of my life. And it's the same thing when me and my wife made the decision to get pregnant, and we literally got pregnant that weekend. I remember on my birthday, she comes to me with a positive pregnancy test, and she was pregnant, and I was just so full of fear, so struck with fear, and I spent the next 10 months living in fear. And I remember that being at the hospital and that being like struggling for the emotional connection, and like, is this thing gonna happen, like, this whole process of like living in fear, and like, what it's like being a father, and like, am I gonna, be able to handle this and do all this thing, and helping deliver my daughter, and like the head was coming out, and they literally picked her up and they handed her to me, and umbilical cord still attached. And I remember like overcome with this sense of spirit and warmth and welcome, and like just crying and crying and crying and crying, and like lifting her up and putting her onto my wife, and then them cutting the umbilical cord, and like being so in love, right? And like loving this, like agape, right? Like that love they talk about, unconditional love, right? And like, you know, I've known my daughter a total of 30 seconds at this point, and like knowing that I would literally do anything that it takes to make her happy and feel whole in this world, and like keep her safe and protected, and like love her endlessly, right? Like a father needs to, you know, and like that space in me that I thought wasn't ready to be a father was so ready, right? And so fulfilled. And like at that point, like I just never not knew what to do. Right? Like as a father, like it's like this spiritual intuition that I gained through recovery. You learn the process, right? Like you learn what your child needs through like the specific cries that they have. And you gain that spiritual intuition because they don't have a voice and they can't tell you, right? It's that same spiritual intuition that I get sitting down with somebody taking their first breaths of recovery in this world, right? Like, I don't know how to help you, but I'm going to learn together with you right now, right? Like I never knew how to be a father until like, and then emotional connection, right? Like I never knew how to become, you know, I never knew what it was needed to be a father until I became a father, right? And like started that process. And now my daughter's 4, and like navigating that process of like, you know, interacting and answering all these questions about the world that just never seem to end, and like this obsession with animals and like what they need, and like, I don't know, let's look it up, you know, and like we learn, and like we you know, we go to the zoo, and like we go to all these animal exhibits and experience it, you know, and I teach her about animals in the house, and you be gentle with your pets, and like it's just a spiritual knowledge that you just have inside you that you just need to tap into.
Do you think everybody has that within themselves?
I think that the greater majority of the world does.
This spiritual sense of knowing what to do? Like a spiritual... So I guess, are you saying that you believe that every person has some type of spiritual or emotional compass within inside of them?
Yes, I think that the greater majority of people do. It can get clouded by greed, drugs, alcohol, the want for more, sex, whatever type of thing makes them feel outside of self, right? And like for me, like that was heroin and fentanyl and cocaine, right? And like I filled that bubble, and like, you know, it's why inside of us, like there's that God-given intuition that when we do good, it feels good, and when we do wrong, it feels wrong, right? We're born with that. Like, do we learn it throughout the world and from our parents? Yes, but like it's also a natural God-given intuition, right? And when I, you know, do something wonderful and have a great fulfilling day with my daughter, you know, and we go into a zoo or an animal park, or we spend time outside with our dog, and like, you know, that fulfillment of supporting another person, and like that's the type of joy and good and feeling that like I have. It's that spiritual sense that like I know I'm fulfilled, right?
I think that the lifestyle, habits, and our circle of influence can really impact that, right?
Yes.
And when I was in active addiction, I knew that I wasn't living a life of integrity.
Yes.
But I also gave 0 fucks.
Mm-hmm. Because drugs and alcohol is more important.
Right.
Because drugs and alcohol distorted that sense of spirituality within you, right? It overtook you, and it overtook your spirit.
And when I got to prison,
yes,
it was amazing that once this active craving and mindset kind of subsided, once I was up at McDougall Walker, which is a completely different environment, mm-hmm. I almost started to adopt ethics that I didn't have before.
Yes.
And it wasn't that I didn't have them before. I had them at other periods of my life, just not an active addiction. Mm-hmm. And I can remember some guys breaking stones because I always liked gambling and playing cards and stuff. And one of these OGs started, you know, busting the balls of another guy and said, "Oh, you're one of these that come in and they get right? You found Jesus, right?" And it kind of hit me because he wasn't talking to me. But I was like, wow, am I this guy that just came in and started thinking that, like, I'm better, or is this ego, or no, it was just a moral compass of like, I'm not going to do unto others as I wouldn't want done unto me, mm-hmm. right? And it's just such a basic principle. It's almost a principle of humanity, mm-hmm. in the sense of treat others how you want to be treated, right? And so I find that interesting because you kind of come to this period of being a father. You're in recovery personally, professionally, you get the dog, which I also had a dog in early recovery. I think my mom and sister watched too much Pit Bulls and Parolees because they had one right when I came out of Connecticut Valley Hospital. But it did give me a sense of purpose.
Yep.
It did give me a connection. It did give me a responsibility to a living being, which I already took on that responsibility with great seriousness. It gave me connection. It was not a training ground for me to be a parent, right? Because I don't have any kids. But for you, all of this experience and this moral compass, it seems as though this spiritual and moral compass with your experience really comes together in your story once you have a kid.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for you, but it's kind of the way I'm processing it.
I think it's a slow over the time process.
Okay.
Right, that like we get pieces here and pieces there. Like a lot of people describe it as layers of an onion, right? So my first 4-step is I got as honest as I could. I like held things back, but they didn't come up yet, and I didn't look at them yet, and like layers of the onion come off today, right? In that, patience and tolerance, right? The thing with a lot of people in early recovery is they're like, in the first week of recovery, they're like, I gotta get a job, gotta get it, all these things, right?
Gotta figure out everything now or yesterday. It's like, slow down.
And I had a slow process of recovery in the beginning. I lived at my parents' house on a twin bed that I grew up on at 22 years old, 23 years old. I got a little old 2005 Toyota Tacoma that like putted around and had body damage all over the thing. And it got me 2 meetings, and it helped me get people to Detox, and it helped me, get 2 groups, get to wherever, right? It was a very, my first job in recovery. I made $15 an hour washing dishes and slinging pizzas, and I went to a lot of meetings, and I did a lot of things with people in recovery, right? And like, it was that slow, long-term process where like everything just didn't happen right away, right? The first job I went for in recovery, I didn't get. Right? There's multiple jobs in recovery that I went for and didn't get, right? But I had to put myself out there and try that process and like, really navigate this world and like learn how to live life sober. It's the same thing with being a father. You have a kid, you don't pop out an 18-year-old kid that, right? You have to like go through the process. And the thing is too, is every age is the best age, right? So when they're a newborn, you get to enjoy that, like bringing somebody new into the home and like living life with a baby, and they're so cute. And then like they get to walk and you get to enjoy that piece. Then they start to talk and ask you all these questions, and you get to enjoy that. And then they start school and you get to enjoy that process with them. And then you get to help facilitate them getting friends and making friends and like the social aspects of the world, and you get to teach them about that, and then like watching them engage with others and have like start to build relationships and the social functions and go through school. Like, it's really about being in the here and the now and enjoying it, right?
Being in the moment, living in the moment, embracing the moment.
Yes.
You have a mental, physical, spiritual approach. And what I'm interested to understand is, while you're going through this, what's the design of your recovery? Maybe week by week, month by month, year by year. So your daughter's 4 years old now. Mm-hmm. How has your recovery changed since having your daughter?
So I can't be afraid to change. And my recovery can't be afraid to change, right? I mean, there's things that always, like, for me, meetings and 12-step recovery, and that's always a big thing. There was a period of time that I went without meetings, which was good for me because it really helped me get back into meetings. I gained about 70 pounds during COVID. Now I just lost 30 of it. Right, so I had to go through the gym trying to eat a little bit better. I still enjoy candy and sweets, and that's one thing that I need to work on. But still, I'm very, very active in the gym 3 to 4 times a week, heavy lifting, doing my thing. And that process started with me walking into a Planet Fitness and then now getting into a lifting gym, right? I had to get there and I had to do and I had to learn. And then I started watching these videos online and talked to other men in the program who were really into fitness and like lifting and doing that type of thing, and like starting to get better and get healthier in that thing so I can stick around for my kid, and like, starting to let go of certain things in my life that caused me pain and heartache, right? And like spiritual pain, right? And like learning that and like trying to start to look at things and become a better man, and let go of guilt and shame and fear, right? And like that process.
Interesting. So you've found yourself in a position where you've been trying to maximize yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. One, because you can be of service to other people,
Yes.
2, you can be a better father. 3, you could be a better person to yourself. At what point did you start to adopt different lifestyles and approaches to doing things?
Every point in my life has a different turning point, specifically like one like is the weight thing, right? So I remember probably my kid was like 6 months. I go downstairs, I wake up at 2 a.m. I get her back down to sleep. I go downstairs to smoke a cigarette and smoke a cigarette outside, and I grab a Hostess cupcake from the fridge, and I'm like, go to use the bathroom, and I pass by myself in the mirror, and I'm like holding this cupcake and trying to take a leak, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You got sober to fucking live like this, dude? Like, really? Like, what kind of fucking life is this? Right? And like, just like, can't you do better? And like, it was like a little bit of a heartfelt back and forth. And then the next day I went out and I said, all right, like, when you look at my schedule, what days can I leave early and hit the gym before work and that type of stuff, and started to build a little bit of a gym routine, and it worked really good. And then I said, like, this gym routine is kind of mediocre. I think I should really like talk to some people, do better. Got into a better gym routine, and I kind of outgrew a specific gym. And I said, I can do a little bit better with a little bit more here, and got into a gym with some more experienced equipment, and really started to navigate my life. Started to get into the sauna and started to get into the cold plunge, and really kind of navigate the whole process of like things that make me feel good without drugs and alcohol and are healthy for you, right?
Okay, so now you're 8 years, almost 9 years in active recovery. You have a personal program for recovery. You have a professional role in the recovery space. What is your blueprint for getting and maintaining your sobriety at this point?
I think that for me, it's a steady diet of balance, right? So we've had good discussions around this. So for me, I think that God won't put things on my plate that I can't handle, right? Or if God puts something on my plate, it'll push something else off of my plate in that timing. So I need a good recovery meeting, right? So I need a good home group. That's first things first. I need a core group of guys around me that I can engage with weekly. I need that. Definitely need the gym 3-4 times a week, right? I need that hot, I need the sauna, I need the ice baths, I need all that stuff to make me feel physically good. I need time with my daughter, right? I need to be engaged with my daughter for sure. I don't want to be a present yet inactive parent, right? So I don't want to be a parent that sits on the couch and scrolls their phone. I want to go outside. I want to do stuff. I want my kid to feel engaged when I'm there and enjoying the process. I want a good, healthy relationship, and healthy relationships for me, like as a person who's married, like it doesn't mean we don't fight. It means that we're able to work through situations that come up, right? And navigate that, and like take a look at what the other person needs emotionally and grow towards giving that. And then I need people to guide me, right? I need people to look up to. I need people that are walking in front of me on the trail, right? I need to look at those things. I need good leadership. As much as I am a leader myself, I need people who definitely guide me and lead me and support me and call me on my shit. And I need connection, time with other men in recovery for sure. I need time with my dog. And then I like hobbies. I like good sports, football, basketball, baseball, that types of stuff, right? This pure form of entertainment for me, right? As a person who's like a former athlete, never really did anything with it, but really I need that as a part of my life.
Interesting. So you have your blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain to somebody in early recovery what a successful blueprint could look like or does look like?
You got to ask them good questions. So you got to help them find those things, because I didn't realize how much I love sports till I was a couple of years into recovery. And I'm like, damn, man, I'm bored all the time, right? And like, okay, well, what I like for entertainment is like I started golfing. It's like my first sober summer, right? I just hit that, coming up on that 1 year mark. I'm like, what am I going to do all the time, except for go to meetings and go to work, right? So I'm going to golf. So I started to learn how to golf, right? I took a couple of lessons, I got into it, but I needed people around me to give me suggestion and support, right? So with that, asking those people like, hey, what do you like to do? Like, what is your forms of entertainment? What does self-care look like to you, right? What do you enjoy in recovery? What are things that support you in your recovery?
I find it very interesting because what I always hear in the recovery community is community.
Yes.
I always hear community in the recovery community. And it's interesting because if you're around other people who have like thought processes on certain things, it can become an echo chamber of sorts, but it's not negative because you're doing things for yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually, right? And you find individuals who might challenge you. You find individuals who might propose an idea like going to Miami that you just didn't think of, or going to a game. And I find that so incredibly powerful because our circle of influence, in my experience, is such a powerful motivator to pursue different things in life, right? For instance, I'll share this experience with you. I was relatively fearful in starting a business at one point, but speaking to someone that has a spiritual process, they're not in addiction recovery, but they are very spiritually grounded and have a process of living, and speaking to people that are actively in recovery, they pretty much said, shut up, take the leap. And knowing that those people were around me, I felt some level of confident as I've been in myself. It was just kind of that nudge to be like, stop making excuses, bro.
Yep.
Do it. And you share a lot about that, and I think it's so powerful. So looking at your experience, personally and professionally, what is one piece of advice or one thought that you might share with someone who has been impacted by addiction?
I would say do not quit before the miracle happens, right? So there's nothing I can do about wasted time, but there is something I do about wasting more time, right? So getting into recovery and finding recovery, right? I had to really give myself that space of forgiveness, right? And like make mistakes and allow the process to happen and go through what I had to go through to get to where I am today, right? Like I made a lot of mistakes in early recovery, but the biggest thing I did was not use, right? And when I wanted to use, I worked through that and didn't use. I had to really stick around till the miracle happened.
It's interesting because you share so many different points with such a simple idea. I hear compassion for oneself, right? Because I have a hard voice on myself, but you had a level of compassion, right? A level of understanding. And then also, like you said, sticking around until the miracle happens, because nobody really knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But if we can step outside of active addiction for these days, powerful things can happen. And you don't need to live in that selfish, sick cycle of active addiction and impacting all these people and yourself in a negative way.
Absolutely.
You got a lot to live for, brother.
Thank you.
I am so incredibly happy that you came here today. I am so incredibly grateful that you've been a part of my recovery journey and my circle of influence. We got another day in the books, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be sober today with you.
Thank you for joining myself and TJ Aitken today on Investing in Sobriety. Click subscribe, follow us. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. We have more content coming. I have to say this with absolute gratitude. I'm sending you nothing but love and good vibes. Make it a great day.